ready, go. When I see what it is, what they did, and how they died, in the end, and now we know, we all together, we gotta try. We gotta try. Dan Grider, Probable Cause. It's Sunday night, October 22, 2023. Glad to have you with us tonight. Another Sunday evening accident general aviation broadcast. This one's going to be a little bit different because of the profoundness of what's happened here in the last week. I'll get to all that in just a moment. I'm going to catch up a few housekeeping items here. First of all, today is Dylan's birthday, and he turned exactly 24 today. So take time, if you're in the live chat room today, make fun of Dylan, call him out, do something, and wish him a happy birthday. 24, he's a student pilot out there flying around America in a Piper PA-28 140. No magenta line, no ForeFlight, no iPad, and pilotage and dead reckoning. He's accumulating massive amounts of cross-country hours with a stack of sectionals, an E6B, a pencil, and a compass. So can it be done? Yes, it can. We've already done quite a lot of it. He's got a whole lot more to do. If you want to watch his Instagram channel, Facebook, you can follow along and see what he's doing. He's also got a YouTube channel. He's posting some stuff on there as a tiny little itty-bitty fledgling YouTuber, showing you where he's gone and all that kind of stuff. So take your time and follow along. Wish Dylan a happy birthday today if you can. I'd like to say thanks to Aero Graphics in Colorado for the paint scheme design. We painted the airplane and put on a Aero Graphics paint scheme, and that's on the airplane, and worked good. Those guys hooked us up and donated Dylan a scheme that we laid out on the airplane. Super easy, installed the whole thing in about 2 hours. Also, Alpha Aviation donated us a shoulder harness kit. And you're going to hear me harping more and more and more on shoulder harnesses the further we go on this channel. Shoulder harnesses, they sent us the kit and we installed it at the last annual. The problem was that the belts were back ordered, and we have been flying some without the seat belts. The kit is installed and we did the STC. The whole process was very easy. Super good kit. That's Alpha Aviation in Minnesota that provided that. And the belts themselves actually came in here the other day, and I'm going to show a quick clip of Dylan opening the box and inspecting the belts. Here's that.
All right, well, Alpha Aviation must have known it was my birthday or something. The package came in the mail yesterday, so just sliced it open, and we're going to take a look at what they've got. These are the seat belts, or the harnesses for the Cherokee. So when I do have an accident, not if, but when I have an accident, I'll have more birthdays to go. So thank you to Alpha Aviation. We're going to check out what's in this box. There you go. Look at that. So we've got the brackets already installed, and this is going to go right on that bracket. So they sent us 2 of these. And we'll unwrap all that. Plenty more stuff in here. Actually, there's 4, I think. 4 belts.
I also made a ride-along video last week. I used Dylan's Cherokee 140. I didn't tell him, but I went out there and snuck out and put a bunch of these GoPro cameras in the airplane. Did just 2 laps around the traffic pattern. I intend to do more of those probably once a week, midweek. I'm going to start doing a ride-along video when I can to show a couple examples here and just show you how I'm operating the airplane. They're not perfect. I do make mistakes. I'm trying to show you the concepts that we're talking about here: AQP, DMMS, VREF, and all the AQP concepts that are listed here, how to handle those. These are things that are not in your ACS. They're not in your private pilot material, and these are the things that are going to help keep you alive. They're free. There's no advertisements. They're free to watch, and I appreciate you keeping up with those. Those have done very good. I've got 2 of them out there so far in that series. Hope to keep on kind of chipping away at that as we go. Now for tonight, since I last sat in this chair last Sunday night, only one fatal has occurred. So here's the sheet for October of this year. And the only one that has been added is this A36 in California. You can see it right here. I don't have the N number, and I don't have very much information on this particular aircraft at this time as of yet, but it will be coming. I know it was a takeoff accident. I know 2 people died. I know they both got trapped inside the airplane and it burnt. They couldn't get anybody out. A horrible tragedy and a loss for obviously several families and friends and community involved in that accident in California. So tonight I am going to get to the main point of this. It'll be a little bit shorter video tonight because we don't have a whole bunch of general aviation fatals, just the one here, and I don't have very much information on that, but a couple other housekeeping items here. November 8th, I want to tell you about this Zoom call. It's free to join. My good friend Laura Savino is going to be conducting this on behalf of the 99s. Here's the registration to link, and I'll also include the link, the hot link in the description of this video. Sign up. It's free. The concept, or actually I should say the talk, is about Tenerife. Now, Captain Laura Savino flew with the guy that was actually on the 747 that got hit by the other airplane, and she's presented this numerous times at numerous locations with standing room only. The insight that she has on Tenerife is truly amazing, and I think you'll enjoy this free Zoom conference. It's on November 8th. Then November 9th, I will be up at Bowling Green, BWG, at EAA 11699. Here's the link for it. Here's the information for it. You can contact them. I suggest that you RSVP, kind of give them a heads up. It's free as far as I know, maybe a slight donation for food, but it's a dinner function. We're going to go up there and play banjos and have fun and talk about AQP and Bowling Green. That's November 9th. Then the big one that I can't wait to tell you about, November 24, 25. It's the 52nd anniversary of the DB Cooper hijacking in Portland. So I'm going out to Portland for the weekend. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'll be out there Friday night and Saturday night at the same place. That's a little restaurant in Vancouver, just on the north side of the Columbia River, called Victor 23. Now, Victor 23 is the name of the airway that the airliner flew that night. It flew Victor 23 south from Seattle until it got to Battleground VOR, where it made a slight turn, headed over the town of Portland. So Victor 23 is actually very, very close to being on the center line of Victor 23. The pub is actually very close to being on the actual center line of Victor 23, the airway, which is still in existence today. Now, my friend out there is the owner. He's the pilot. He owns this place. It's a fantastic location. I will be out there both evenings, Friday night and Saturday night. There's no program. There's no band. There's no anything. It's a meet and greet. Come by, say hi. I'll be there 6 to close, Friday night and Saturday night. I'd love to visit with you. We could talk about airplanes. We could talk about AQP. We could talk about DB Cooper, and whatever you would like to do is fine, but I'll be there both Friday night and Saturday night. It's a cool place. I've been there many, many times. If you recall, it's the very, very end scene of my DB Cooper Deep Family Secrets Part 1, which is still up and on the air if you want to watch that video. It's a long one, the DB Cooper story. I got Part 1 and Part 2. If you haven't seen those, they're kind of cool stories, and I think you would be interested in seeing that. Victor 23, November 24, 25, Vancouver in the state of Washington, which is just across the river, just opposite of PDX in Portland. I hope to see you out there. Now, before we jump into the very, very end of this thing, I'm going to talk about one other accident that just came out. The final NTSB report came out on this. I looked at the whole thing when it happened, and then the final, I've taken all this stuff. This is November 471 Bravo Lima. This happened March 25 of 22, so about 18 months ago. And here's the deal. This female CFI and her student took off. It's a Diamond DA-40. They took off, and just about point where they were about to turn crosswind leg, they had an engine failure slant rollback, and the instructor in the right seat instructed the student in the left seat to start a left-hand turn. Now I'm going to show you the graphic here. This came from the NTSB, and I've added some extra graphics here, but here's their flight path. They ended up in the trees and almost killing themselves. Look at the amount of real estate that they passed by that they could have landed gear down in a field, no problem, but they were determined to make it onto the downwind leg, and they thought they could make it back to the airport. It's the same story, different day. That's SSDD. Same story, different day. They tried to make it back to the airport, whereas their emphasis should have been put this airplane on the ground in any open field, open the door, wouldn't even be a scratch on that airplane. I think we got to start realigning our new concepts and our new philosophies. Abnormal in flight, if your engine quits, the insurance company owns the airplane as of that instant. You didn't cause it. It's not your fault. Land it in the nearest piece of field or Farmer Fred's bacon field, whatever you got. Open the door, make a call, and everything's good. You crash this thing into the trees and try to stretch this thing, try to get back to the airport. The results are often catastrophic. They're often deadly. Don't try to do it. Look at the field. Here's the graphic for it right here. Look at choice A, B, and C, where they could have put this airplane. Now I'm going to show you the transcript, not actually the transcript, but the statement written by both Emily and the student here. I'll put those on the screen. I'm not going to take the time to read them, but notice the effort on Emily's here. She put the effort in here to say that she instructed the guy to turn back towards the runway. As soon as the problem happened, she told him to turn left and head back for the airport. Here's the students, and he said he was flying, and the CFI, when this thing happened, she told him to head back for the airport. He turned the airplane left. They were both just determined to get that airplane back to concrete, pavement, something smooth, something on the airport. They were trying to make it back. It didn't work out. The engine finally finished failing, and what you get is what you get. And at that point, they were out of open fields. All they had was trees, and this was a violent impact. They did sustain a lot of injuries, but thankfully, they're alive today. They were able to crawl out of the wreckage. Somebody called 911 and they got help fairly quickly. So very, very thankful. Both individuals are alive and still out there flying today. Another great success story. So here's the month of October data sheet. We've already talked about this A36. That's really accident number 10, which is pretty good. I don't like it, but 10 for the month of October so far is actually fairly good. If we can cap it at 10 for the month, that would be a great goal to have. Make sure your name does not end up on this list next Sunday night. Be careful out there. Try to pick one of those and only fly one of them. Night, IMC, ice and terrain. If you're a private pilot, pick one at the very most. Don't even pick any if you don't have to. But be very careful out there. Be ready for the scenario that can cause you a problem later on. Let's get into the final story of this. I have to say, the theme that comes to mind here is irony. I've never seen anything more ironic, and I'm going to illustrate this. This illustration ended up in my lap here. I did not design this or plan this, but I'm going to talk about two accidents back to back. Both of them completely different outcomes, completely different circumstances. The first one, two very accomplished pilots in New York flying a Cessna day VFR with an engine rollback that didn't even fail, just rolled back a little bit. And they did not make it back to the airport. Their poor planning, their poor decision making somehow ended up causing them to fly into the berm of this airport. The NTSB preliminary is out, and we're going to talk about that. The next one that I'm going to illustrate, and in contrast to, is two women flying at night, complete engine failure, and they survived. So it's night, and I'm going to show you the interview. I actually was able to get both of these women together and interview them. That's going to be the closing scene for this video. I think you're going to want to stick around and watch this because you are not going to believe this interview, and I'm going to talk about that. First, before we get on with that, let's talk about AOPA. Here's the statement from AOPA. I was not happy with AOPA's initial covering of this. Remember, AOPA came out immediately within a couple hours of the accident, and here's the statement that they put out here. They said they used the word failed. Whoever wrote this press release, I would not have used the word failed. They did a lot of speculation. They didn't know very much. And the entire slant of AOPA has been honoring Richard. They did not think to offer any extension of condolence to Russ. Russ Francis was the other guy. He was a dad, a father, equal. If I had been writing this, here's the way I would have written it instead. Let's not use the word fail, and let's offer equal condolences to both individuals. Both men are dead. Let's equally treat both with equal respect and not rush to tell everybody what happened, because we don't really know. All we really know is that they did try to turn around, and that's all we know at this point. Is it an impossible turn? Don't know. Can't really tell yet. Let's get into the specifics of this general aviation double fatal accident, because the NTSB preliminary is out, and I'm going to dive in kind of deep on this one.
In approximately 7 to 10 days, we'll produce a preliminary report, and that preliminary report will have the facts, conditions, and circumstances as we know them up to this point. And because it is preliminary, it is subject to change. And then what will happen is, in approximately 18 months, the NTSB will produce a factual report, which will also have analysis and a statement of probable cause that will be issued by the 4 board members that are appointed by the President of the United States.
So the report did come out on October 21 days after the crash. NTSB doesn't really adhere to the 7 to 10 day thing that they tell you about. Rarely, if ever, do they ever get a report out within 7 to 10 days, like they said. And they also tell you a year to 18 months before the final probable cause will be issued. Rarely happens. Oftentimes it's in excess of 3 years for many accidents, and that's okay. It's a government agency. They're doing the best they can with their $500 million per year, so that's really all they can do. But I thought that was a very interesting take here, and the investigator in charge wrote this report. Notice the NTSB preliminary reports are never dated. So I went ahead and stuck a date on it, and here it is right here, just to show you this is the date that came out. Now let's talk about the other guy that was on this airplane. His name is Russ Francis. I'm going to read this to you here. This is from the internet. Growing up, Francis lived the island life in Hawaii. His father was a wrestling promoter who worked with celebrities like Andre the Giant. Francis only played college football for 1 year at the University of Georgia before being selected the first round of the 1975 NFL draft by the New England Patriots. During his year at the University of Oregon, Francis ran track with legendary Steve Perpetuity, something like that. This guy was an amazing athlete. My point here is that not only was he a great football player, this guy was a swimmer, track athlete, basketball, and he was a family guy. The loss for the Francis family. Russ Francis had 5 siblings. He has 3 children. He has extensive family. The loss in the Francis family runs every bit as deep as the McSpadden family, and it should be shared equally. I think that AOPA automatically and already is posturing themselves for the legal, trying to pin Richard McSpadden in the right seat as the pilot not flying, laying all blame on Russ Francis in the left seat. Now, what I know from the Francis family, who has contacted me directly, I've spoken directly with members from the Francis family. I did not reach out to them. They reached out to me. Russ Francis was a very kind, gentle, meek individual. He would have been in awe of Richard McSpadden. He's not a formation guy. And this airplane, this Cardinal, was not owned by Russ Francis. This Cardinal was owned by Lake Placid Incorporated. Here's the registration for it. This partnership was only formulated and thought up in the very recent months here. Russ Francis has not been flying a lot. He's 7 years old. He only recently kind of got into flying. That Cardinal became kind of half his when he became a half investor in Lake Placid, and the Cardinal became available. Now, the story gets even more twisted here. 2 mechanics here. The previous mechanic was in the process of being fired, let go, something. He was about to be let gone. just before this accident. This Cardinal has not flown much over the last year. Here's the flight aware data on this thing. This thing has not flown much at all. It only has a few hours on it since Major, which is highly suspect, and the Major was a long time ago. This thing definitely had some problems here on the Cardinal. It hasn't flown much. The previous 2 flights were test flights trying to find something out. The guy that was working on this was no longer employed by Lake Placid at the day of the crash. The new guy, his name is Jamie, showed up a few days after the crash. Lake Placid still has other aircraft, but they got rid of the other guy. There's going to be a backstory here in the human factors of what was going on, what was wrong with that engine, and if you notice during the taxi out, it had problems. This engine shut off. This airplane had some problems, and they should not have taken it into the air. This was not Russ Francis as the PIC for this formation takeoff. This was Richard McSpadden in the right seat. These are my opinions, and my opinions only. These are purely speculation, but from what I know of formation flying, the U.S. Air Force, the Thunderbirds, McSpadden would have been all over this formation takeoff. He's in the right seat. AOPA does make special exception to make it very clear, including paperwork defining who the PIC is going to be specifically for this situation. Let's listen to AOPA talk about who's going to be PIC on this accident.
Russ was in the left seat and Richard was in the right seat. Now, typically on photo missions for AOPA, the owner of the subject airplane flies all phases of flight except for the formation portion of the photo shoot.
Let's go back to the AOPA press release, which was released just a few hours after the crash. They wanted to make sure here that they said the Cardinal, in which Richard was in the right seat, experienced an emergency after takeoff. The airplane attempted to return to the aircraft but failed to make the runway. They talked extensively about Richard and giving condolences to Richard and his family. Oh, by the way, Russ Francis was also killed, AOPA, in case you didn't see. Our thoughts are with Richard's family this time. Well, I would say our thoughts are with Richard's family. We don't really care about the other guy. That's AOPA's stance on this thing. Here's the way I would have written it if I had been writing this thing. I would have said, we are deeply sad to report that Russ Francis and Richard McSpadden died in an aircraft accident outside Lake Placid, New York on Sunday afternoon, October 1, 2023. Early unconfirmed reports indicate that the Cessna 177 Cardinal may have suffered an abnormal condition after takeoff and reported via radio that the intent was to return for landing at the departure airport. Both Richard and Russ were accomplished pilots. Both were considered trusted colleagues, friends, sons, husbands, and fathers. Russ is survived by his very close, extensive family, siblings, and children. Richard is survived by his wife, Judy, his son, Grant, and his daughter, Annabelle. Our thoughts are with both families equally at this time. We will provide more details as they become available. That's the way I would have written it. I was very taken back. The family was very taken back by how many people jumped in and tried to make money and sell advertising on this accident and only feature Richard McSpadden and talk about the other guy being some football player was pretty disheartening and pretty disrespectful. Let's go on and take a look at Richard's credentials here. Here's one thing I've never understood here. Richard was supposed to have 10,000 glorious flight hours when he started at AOPA in 2017, but here's his history. He was born in 1960. In high school, he was in high school from 73 to 79. That's his 4 high school years. Approximately about 400 hours of flying time. He started the U.S. Air Force in 1983. He did Air Force 83 to 2003, so he got his 20. He ended up with about 1,600 hours of F-15 and F-16 time. Then he went to Hewlett-Packard. From 2003 to 2017, he went to Hewlett-Packard, where he did not fly for Hewlett-Packard. He had a desk job in some other capacity. He may have flown a little on the outside, but nothing for Hewlett-Packard. Then in 2017, he shows up at AOPA with claiming 10,000 hours. I really question that. I'm not sure. At AOPA between 2017 and 2023, he may have accumulated 400 hours. That's a guess, but not a lot. They're mostly administrative. They don't fly a lot. They do fly a little bit, but probably 400 or 500 hours since 2017. How did Richard McSpadden end up with 10,000 hours? And Russ Francis is not an expert in a Cardinal. He inherited that Cardinal. Richard McSpadden is not an expert in a Cardinal. I don't know that Richard had ever even been in a Cardinal before. it's kind of like the blind leading the blind out here on this photo shoot. I don't think it's really fair to pin this entire thing on Russ, which is definitely the direction it's going to go. If AOPA has anything to do with it, they're going to absolve themselves of all responsibility because it's Russ's airplane. He's in the left seat and he's the pilot in command, and he did it. I don't think he did. Let's go on and take a look at the rest of the data from the NTSB preliminary. The accident airplane took off about 700 feet behind the Beech A-36. The pilot owner was to fly the airplane during the takeoff and climb out, and after joining up in formation, the pilot-rated passenger would have taken over the controls and flown the airplane during the photo shoot. Listen to this. During taxi out, witnesses, plural, several, heard the engine of the accident airplane running when the Beech A-36 pulled up next to it. The accident airplane's engine then shut off, and about 10 seconds later, the engine restarted. During the takeoff roll, a witness described that the engine sounded as if the propeller was set for climb and not for takeoff. Not necessarily climb or takeoff a pitch, but it just wasn't producing power. There's something wrong. Then he heard the engine surge during the initial climb. The witness further described that the engine did not sound as if it was running at full power. The accident airplane then made a gentle left turn while it was about 300 to 400 feet above ground level to join with the Beech A-36. So it took off and made a little left-hand turn, and it attempted to join. They were still pressing on. They made it to at least 300 or 400 feet, and they're pressing on northwest bound. They made a little left-hand turn. They flew out a long ways, and that's how come so many people over town watched this Cardinal go over. I have redrawn my surmise of the accident profile here. The actual engine serious problem occurred a little bit later, pretty much over Mirror Lake Restaurant when it came over the top, and I put this circle in here. This is all a guess on my part, but I think they were still trying to make this photo flight happen all the way until they got several miles off the airport and got up to 500 or 600 feet. The problem was the airplane wasn't climbing, it wasn't performing. Then they made a hard right-hand turn. And then the NTSB says that the airplane headed back for the airport, trying to make it back on runway 14. Let's take a look at the next one here. This has to do with the maintenance. It says the airplane's most recent annual inspection was completed on April 7, which is fairly fresh. At the time of the inspection, the airplane had 5,300 hours, but only 36.7 hours of operation since major overhaul. Listen to this. The wreckage. The right wing sustained upward buckling from the wingtip inward to the aileron and was slightly buckled. The fuselage and empennage were slightly buckled along the right side from the aft side of the cabin door to approximately fuselage station 225. This airplane hit the side of this thing going to the left, not to the right. I'll be willing to accept criticism for that and open thought. Maybe you see it the other way. I think this airplane hit in a left-hand turn trying to go to the left, not to the right. This thing hit with the right wing. The imprint I saw on the ground because I stood there was a right main tire, and the nose hit the side of this thing. It buckled it inboard because the right wing was up, and what it did is it hit the side of that and it spun 180. It spun 180. It hit right wing, and right main, and it spun it to the right and then fell down the hill. That's how come the left main wing ended up facing uphill, making it look like it flew into the hill left wing high. I really think it flew into that hill right wing high, but that's a guess. That's all I've got to go on so far. Let's take a look at the landing gear. This is an amazing slide. Let's take a look at this. The nose landing gear was crushed aft during the impact sequence, and the actuator was separated. Its position could not be determined. The main landing gear were in an intermediate position. Now, what this means is that the gear was in transition. The nose gear comes down real fast. This long, spindly 210 style landing gear takes a long time to come down. They threw this gear down at the last second. The nose gear got down and locked, and that's how come it's bent completely aft. It went down and locked and got bent. When this nose gear comes down, it's a lot of drag. This landing gear hanging down here, I think they threw the gear out at the last second, still thinking that they were going to make it to the airport. Within the last 3 seconds of flight, they figured out, I think Richard McSpadden figured out he was not going to make it, and he should have not have thrown those wheels down. This landing gear was in transition. It wasn't up and it wasn't down. The landing gear got bent backward, and the wheels were contacting the fuselage when they found the airplane. I think this airplane hit in a right-hand turn, right wing high on the side of that thing. The right tire and the nose That's what caused the engine and engine firewall and engine mount to be bent. Let's read this. The engine remained attached to the firewall through its respective engine mounts. The engine mount sustained damage from the impact sequence in the form of fractures, bends to the various tube structures, and it was canted to the right of the airplane center line. Everything in here points to the fact that this airplane hit with the right wing high on the slope, the right main tire hit, the right wing hit the fuselage and bent it up, and once it hit, it spun it around. Both individuals were alive, according to the people that I talked to. Both individuals were very much alive when the first responders, who were not trained, EMS was not the first ones to the scene. Citizens were the first one to the scene, and they did their very best to help the two men the very best that they could. I don't have any further information on that, and I'm going to go further and surmise and guess and speculate, because I know you like it. There was GoPros on this flight. There was GoPro footage and GoPros being run. This was a formation flight, and yes, they were going to capture excellent GoPro footage of a formation takeoff and a formation flight that yielded the cover of an AOPA magazine. There was GoPros in flight. I found one guy who could tell me that he specifically saw a GoPro in the Cardinal. He only saw one. How many were in there? I don't know, but I'm going to lay money on the fact that this was absolutely being recorded by GoPro-style cameras inside the Cardinal. Whether we will ever see the daylight of the footage of the data on those cards, I kind of doubt it. I think AOPA and NTSB are going to brush that under the rug, but if those cameras, I think they were in there. I think they were videotaping, and I think they would tell the entire story, remove all of Dan's speculation if you just show us the footage. I think you're going to see Richard reaching for the gear at the last possible second. I don't think AOPA wants to see or have any of that seen, because I think Richard made the takeoff, the flight, the return. I think Richard flew the gear out, and I think it was completely Russ sitting in the left seat along for the ride like he would have been. That's all it is. It's all speculation on my part. I'll be happy to amend and correct later on if we find out that I'm backwards on any of that. It's entirely possible, but all I can tell you is my channel is probable cause as I see it. I made a site visit. The way I see it, the way I see the wreckage and the report, and from what I physically saw on the side of that hill, I think that that's the way the whole thing went down. Now, as tragic as that situation is, a lot of people have commented, well, if Richard McSpadden can't survive a day VFR loss of thrust or a reduction of thrust, how am I supposed to? Well, I got the answer for that, and it landed square in my lap. This is an amazing airplane crash that happened just a few miles from my house, October 10 days after the Lake Placid fatal. This airplane crashes in the woods 2 miles from my house, and I was able to find the wreckage. I was able to find the women. This is 2 women who pulled it off, and I'm going to tell you the difference. The difference is huge. You're going to watch the video interview of these 2 women. McSpadden and Francis were day VFR in a high wing with a reduction of thrust. These 2 women were at night with a loss of thrust in a low-wing airplane, and they're alive today. It's because they had thought about it, they trained for it. The maneuver that they pulled off here, they were determined not to stall this airplane, and they were satisfied to settle this airplane into the tops of the trees, and it made a beautiful story. I could not be more proud of these 2 women. Let's watch this interview. All right, well, it's a happy day. I mean, a really happy day with Yamalitha and Chloe. These girls were in this plane crash, and you're alive. That's totally amazing. So, some injuries, but some important takeaways off this. I'm gonna let you tell them the story yourself. This is a really short video, but this is the thing that I've been kind of harping on for a long time here. Tell me about this engine quit at night. Tell me about not stalling the airplane.
All I can remember is not stalling, and I got the importance of not stalling from watching your videos.
Right.
We couldn't hold any altitude at all once the engine stopped, and we knew we're not going to make it to our destination that was like 12 miles ahead of us. We made a right turn, and we tried to head to the airport that they said was nearest. We saw the beacon, but it was still far away. We knew we were not going to make it.
Right.
And so as we're going through that part, all I'm reminding her is don't stall. Don't stall.
She was the pilot in command. She was flying, but she immediately, when this thing happened, she had you pick up radio duties, and you did the checklist memory items, which is perfect. You even talked about sterile cockpit before you got to the Class Bravo.
Right.
Absolutely.
And all that stuff. The tendency is for people to, in time of crisis, to pull this thing back, and you were able to keep on coaching her to not stall this thing.
Absolutely.
What did it feel like with the engine quit and the ground coming up? You've already told ATC you're not going to make it. Was there a tendency to want to pull?
It wasn't a tendency to want to pull because I know I've encountered a situation where I almost stalled the plane. So kind of had PTSD about stalling. So I made sure I kept the wings level.
Right. But she was still coaching you. You know, your speed got down below best glide a couple times, and in the turn you lost some altitude in the turn.
A lot.
But I think you were kind of on her.
Yeah, don't stall.
Don't stall.
Don't stall.
Don't stall.
We had about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
That's all we had,
You didn't
and
have-
I probably said that more than anything, especially in our turn. You know, don't stall, because we stall in a turn, we're done.
Right.
Um,
And then you ended up at the tops of the trees. This is beautiful. You had the choice to take this thing into a neighborhood. Why didn't you take this into the well-lit neighborhood? Is right there. Why not?
Well, my first thought, I seen a lot of cars on the road, and the second thought was I didn't want to kill any civilians. I didn't want to
Right.
bring any other harm to anybody else other than us two if we had to bring harm to ourselves.
Right.
I thought about it when we saw the streets up under us, that if we land here, because there was trees that would cover up the street.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a clear way
Right.
to the road.
Yeah.
So we would have either hit the trees,
Power
but
lines.
our power lines. But the bad thing would have been we would have landed and hit a house or hit a car.
Yeah. You probably would have exploded.
Yeah,
Probably
would
would've.
have exploded.
ATC told you to head for the road.
They said find a road or a field to put it down in. We couldn't do the road because it was cars.
All right. So when they said find a road, you said no. We're not going to find a road. We're going right here. And then
Yeah.
landing light. Did you turn the landing light off?
No, sir.
No.
So you flew this all the way down, and when you got to the tops of the trees, what speed do you think you're at the tops of the trees?
Well, according to Chloe, we was very slow. I just know, I just knew not to.
As we were coming down, we were at 58.
58.
So because he asked us, could we maintain altitude around 1,000?
Right.
We couldn't. So I watched us come down, and we were coming down. It wasn't really fast. It was like at probably maybe 300 feet per minute, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So when we got to about 500 is when I said again, please don't stall the plane. And so as we got to the trees, the landing light was on. She held the yoke the entire time.
Yeah.
She never let it go. So we went down wings level.
Yeah.
Is how we ended up gliding to the trees.
And then when you hit the tops of the trees, did you feel the compression of the branches in sections? Did you feel it?
Yeah,
Yes,
it was
sir.
like boom, boom. We could feel the pressure of it.
Right.
We were going slow though. So at about 500 feet, we were about 58 knots, and we got a little bit slower. I think we were probably at about 40,
Yeah.
about 40 knots as we went down through the.
Yeah. Well, it would have slowed you a lot going down through there, but it's an amazing story, and you did it right.
Thank you. I did the best I could.
No, you did it good. So anyway, here's the hat. I don't have very many of these, but this is a crazy good story of all the things that went wrong. It could have gone wrong. Plenty of gas on this airplane. We just went through the whole fuel log on this thing. Plenty of gas on this airplane. Too much gas. I'd be in danger of that thing catching fire. This airplane did not run out of gas. Rescue workers were able to find him because of your iPad. Who was it that crawled back to the airplane to get the iPad out?
Me.
That was you. You crawled back.
Yes.
About 2 hours and 30 minutes later,
Yeah.
she climbed.
So
So then they get the iPad out and they're able to ping and use technology. The ELT didn't work and EMS had given up on finding them. Now they get their iPad and they're able to contact somebody and send a pin drop for where they are. Finally, probably almost 3 hours later.
Yeah, so she was able to get the iPad probably about 2 hours and 45 minutes later. I got this math from when I checked into the hospital.
Yeah.
And my iPad has cellular service.
Yeah.
I fly with the iPad with cellular service so
Yep.
that if I have an issue,
Yeah.
I can contact someone.
Yep.
So she was able to get up and FaceTime my daughter who who called my boyfriend, who I share my location
Yep,
with.
yep.
He was able to give it to me.
So there's the technology that effected the rescue on this, which is
Blessed to be here.
totally cool. Well, congratulations. I'm very happy to be here. So happy, and thank you for sharing your story with other people that can learn from this.
Absolutely.
Cool. So if that isn't just amazing, again, deepest respects, condolences for all those. I feel like we really ought to try. I wrote this little song to put on here. You can hear it now. And here's the words for it right here. Here's what it says. When I see what it is, what they did, how they died, in the end, and now we know, we all together, we got to try. We got to try. For my tiny little itty bitty fledgling YouTube channel, Dan Grider. Probably.
When I see